Well, yes, breaking news. The deal is done. Elon Musk is taking Twitter private. Here with more, we've got Yahoo Finance's Dan Howley, who's been standing by and following this for us. So, Dan, let's dive right into what we know right now.
Yes, right now, Twitter has announced that it has accepted the bid of $44 billion from Elon Musk to take over Twitter. This is something that obviously has been weeks in the making. Elon had originally announced, or it was revealed earlier this month, that Elon had taken a 9.2% stake in the company. Twitter had initially said that he would join the board. He then refuted that. And then they said that he wasn't going to join the board. Then they had announced that they were going to go ahead with a poison pill to ensure that he couldn't take over the company via hostile takeover. But now, despite that, they seem to have come to terms and they will sell to him. Shareholders will get $52.40 per share, obviously going with that 420 theme that Elon Musk loves so much. And then at the close of the deal, Twitter will become a privately held company. So what now kind of you have to look at is what this means for Twitter in general. Elon Musk has said in the past that he wants it to have more free speech. Of course, that's not really an issue. A company like Twitter is allowed to use content moderation. That's not a free speech issue. It just depends on what kind of content moderation you want. There's been discussions on if he opens it up to broader speech, then advertisers would flee the platform because of toxic posting from different groups, the potential for that, the potential for their ads to be seen next to that, and users could flee. And it's important to remember that while Twitter seems to have an outsized influence on public discourse, it really is rather small when compared to something like TikTok or Facebook. There's about 211 million monetizable monthly active users. So not nearly what we have with TikTok or Facebook, which TikTok more than 1 billion, Facebook in the billions. So it really is relatively small compared to those kinds of competitors. But again, it does have that outsized impact because of people like Elon Musk, as well as former President Trump, who famously used it essentially as his de facto press office until he was banned following the January 6th attack on the Capitol. But where this leaves Twitter going forward, it's still up in the air. We have to see what kind of changes Elon may move forward with. The first being seemingly an edit button. How exactly that will be implemented, though, remains to be seen.
Okay, so you mentioned Donald Trump there. He has reportedly said that he is not coming back. Perhaps he is focusing on the Truth Social platform that he is launching. But let's start with the board, Dan, and what changed for them? Was it going out there and seeing the dating pool and realizing they weren't that attractive after all? Or was it the markets that had turned and that pullback on Friday? Or was it option C, which is shareholders weren't happy with the direction the board was taking them?
I think it's really that option C, where they wanted to see someone like Elon, who's passionate, come in. Obviously, he's got a lot of supporters throughout the world. But, the board seemed to have been an impediment, at least as far as former CEO and co-founder Jack Dorsey tells it. He had previously tweeted that the board had been essentially Twitter's own worst enemy. And that's the reason why it seemed to just kind of float along at its usual price point. Now, this $54.20 a share is still lower than what it was previously trading at times into the $60 range. But, this seems to be something where the board just had to essentially acquiesce because of kind of the buildup around Musk going forward and wanting to get this company under his wing. And the fact that it's going to be a private entity means that we'll have obviously less insight into how it functions, but that doesn't mean the scrutiny around it will fall any further. This is still a major tech company, despite the fact that, as I said, it has fewer users than the likes of TikTok and Facebook. It does have that outsized influence on public discourse. And so I think that we'll continue to see that kind of scrutiny from the likes of lawmakers and regulators as far as the type of content that's available on it. And that seems to be, as I said, one of the sticking points for Musk, as he's brought up in the past.
And Dan, a lot of people wondering perhaps is Elon Musk spreading himself too thin? We already see what he's doing with the Boring Company, with SpaceX, and of course with Tesla. Is there that concern from the shareholders in some of these other publicly traded companies that Elon is perhaps just going to spread himself too thin?
Yeah, I mean, analysts have said prior to this that they're not worried about him doing that. I mean, you got to figure Elon Musk, yes, he's very involved in the likes of SpaceX, but he's not putting the rockets together, right? He's the big idea person. At Tesla, obviously, he's intimately involved with that company, the boring company, Neuralink. He's got those under his belt already, and now he's adding Twitter. I think, if we do start to see issues with Tesla as far as the quarterly results go, then that would start to bring up the issue of, is he spread too thin? But Tesla just recorded a great quarter. It's not as though they were hurting or are hurting at this point. They seem to be just keeping to roll forward. They just opened 2 plants, one in Texas, one in Germany. They seem to be having troubles with supply chain, although every automaker in the world is, but they seem to be keeping that under control a little bit more. But I do think that that's going to be something as we move forward, as he kind of gets his hands around Twitter and figures out what he wants to do. Will he be spending too much time on that as a pet project? Whereas, shareholders are really looking at Tesla and saying, this is the most important thing to us. You wanted to revolutionize transportation. We've put a lot of this, our blood, sweat, and tears into this as far as the workers go. It's helped make him one of the richest people in the world. So, I do have to imagine that he would focus more on Tesla than anything else. But to your point, yeah, I think that shareholders will look and say if quarterly results aren't what they want, then they may start to look at him and say, what's up with Twitter? Why are you spending so much time there?
Right, and the value of those Tesla shares propping him up to be the richest person in the world. Dan, while we have you, trending on the day of this acquisition, we saw hashtag delete Twitter. We saw hashtag leaving Twitter.
RIP Twitter.
RIP Twitter. And so with all of that in mind, what can end users expect now that this deal is done?
I think from an end user perspective, it's going to be the same as it was. Twitter isn't exactly easy to use. It's an incredibly opaque service. That's why it's so difficult for a lot of people to pick up and get on. It also just doesn't really have a staying factor for a lot of people. I think the reason why it's so popular is because of who uses it, not how many people use it. You have big names, like I said, Elon Musk, former President Trump. You have a lot of journalists, a lot of people in music, in sports. So it's not as though, you have an everyday user jumping on Twitter and scrolling through it like you would on, say, Instagram or TikTok. It really is kind of its own entity. And I don't think it's going to change in the near term. In the future, though, the company did announce that they're working on an edit button. How exactly that rolls out is going to be a big question, because if you had 1 million people retweeting something that you had written and then change it to something that they wouldn't necessarily want to retweet, that becomes a big problem for the platform. So they're going to have to talk about how that'll roll out, and then any kind of changes that Musk wants to make as far as, he had brought up how he wants spam bots deleted. A number of his account followers are actually spam bots. The scammers who are crypto scammers or things along those lines, he wants those gone. So how exactly he's going to do that is up in the air. But I think the big thing we're going to get first is potentially that edit button, which people have been talking about forever. But how exactly he's going to turn this around, make it bigger, make it a more interesting or, place that people actually want to go to on a daily basis. I mean, that really is still something that needs to be answered by himself.
All right, Yahoo Finance's Dan Howley, tech reporter there.